Oh, so good morning, everybody, and
Good
welcome
morning.
to and if we're while I'm delivering the message, if you could all mute yourself, that would be great. Welcome to the One Heart, One Mind online Sunday service. Um, I want to thank Jim and Leslie for letting me come to their house for the service today, since I had no internet. So thank you for that. And our monthly theme for, let's see, I'm gonna, hang on just a minute, multitasking here. Jean, could you help Rosie mute? Thank you. Again, welcome. And I wanted to remind us that our monthly theme for December is celebrating divine truth. Really perfect for a month where we celebrate the miracles of the light of Hanukkah, which Relaine just shared us with us a little bit about that. I'm sure you've all heard the story of the Maccabees and the candle, or the light that didn't go out even though they didn't have enough oil to burn it. And it's a month in which we celebrate the metaphysical birth of the Christ consciousness within us, all the Christians of the world that celebrate Christmas. And we also celebrate the natural cycle of the seasons of darkness and light and rest and renewal as we come up on the winter solstice. And last week, I spoke to you about welcoming the shadow, and I highlighted the importance of bringing all the places within us, our shadows, into the light of divine truth, so that that loving energy of spirit can move through us without tripping over anything we've stuffed into our subjective minds, so that we can actually experience the goodness of our Creator in our own lives, and then share it with others around us, which is really what we do during the holiday season, is share the good, give and receive. So this morning's message is entitled Preparing the Way, which is really, when you think about it, what we started last week, as we recognize and welcome the shadow parts of ourselves, those things that we don't usually like to look at, they're not that comfortable. But when we invite them to rise up to be acknowledged and healed, we become willing to experience all the parts of ourselves. And we begin to recognize that every experience we've ever had in our lives was perfect, just the way it showed up. Not because it was such an awesome experience, but because it moved us along the path of our spiritual evolution. And as we do this powerful healing work of anything that we've repressed in our subjective minds, subconscious or subjective mind, as Holmes called it, it draws us into a deeper connection with Source, a conscious connection that we can carry with us as we move through our daily lives. And as we've said in the past, isn't this the point, is to take our connection with the divine and use it in our everyday lives? And then we can become the witness of every experience we have from that higher perspective, from that witness or observer self. So we can greet every experience without avoiding it or avoiding how we feel about it. And we become better and better and better at doing it. And as this happens, we allow the good of life to flow naturally through us and to shape our lives, to create our lives. We co-create our lives in this way with Spirit. And we could say that we begin to prepare the way for Spirit, life, God, whatever we call it, to flow through us easily and without resistance, without trying to bat things away that we wish we didn't have to deal with. And of course, because we're all a part of the one life of God, when our individual lives are in harmony and in balance, in the flow, if you will, we influence the lives of others. We contribute to the wholeness of all life, to the consciousness of all life. We begin to realize that while we are these individualized expressions of the one life, at our core, we are one. We are one with everything and everyone. And while we celebrate our diversity and our uniqueness as individuals, we're awakening to the truth that it's through loving cooperation that we actually thrive. It's in conscious community that we have the opportunity to really create a world that is an expression of love, a world that, as we like to say, that works for everyone. So I've been thinking about this a lot all week, and I just realized that scientists are discovering. I remember I read this quite a bit in Michael Dowd's book when he talks about Thank God for Evolution. And scientists are discovering that it's not so much survival of the fittest, as Darwin postulated, that moves us forward in our evolution, but how well we fit together in cooperative community that moves us forward, and how we bring our own individual gifts together to benefit the whole. And I want to share a quote from Ernest Holmes, who talked about this really brilliantly. I'm going to share my screen here. Oops, here it is. So Ernest Holmes wrote, when a group of people come together with one accord and with one thought, so when we all come together with a shared intention, if you will, a greater power is generated. This is not because the creative principles respond to a number of people more than it does to one, but because the combined faith of a group reaches a higher level of consciousness. Recall, it calls to mind for me when two or more are gathered in my name. And he goes on, since the explosion of the first atom bomb, we have read about the possibility of a physical chain reaction that might destroy civilization as we understand it. There is another kind of energy, thank goodness, that is even more important. And this is the energy of faith, of affirmative prayer, and spiritual meditation. And I love this line. This brings it all together for us. There is no reason to doubt that in the field of spiritual consciousness, a chain reaction could be created which would bless the world. Bless the world. And isn't that what this entire season is about? You know, I truly believe that this kind of conscious cooperation can and actually is already changing our world. You know, we can learn a lot about how to do this just by looking at our own human bodies. I was listening to what's his name, Bruce Lipton, talk about this. And our bodies are actually a community in and of themselves. Our bodies are a community of 50 trillion individual cells. I was surprised at that number. Who knew? And each cell is like an individual entity within itself. They have the same biological needs, but they each have their own individual and specialized roles and functions within our body. So our bodies are these interactive and cooperative communities of trillions of cells. And they all work together for the common good of the body. They live in harmony and balance. And if one or a few of them get off balance and are not doing well, having trouble doing their individualized job, then all of the other cells come together to correct the problem. And together they contribute to the economy of the health and the harmony and the wholeness and the happiness of our human bodies. We can learn a lot about living in conscious communities just by looking right where we are within our bodies. And really, when you think about it, all of nature thrives when its individual parts live together for the common good of the whole. I mean, just look at the ecosystems around us and in nature, and we see that everywhere. But our bodies, right here where we are, this is an active community. And I believe that this is really one of the most valuable lessons of this whole holiday season, that we are these individualized expressions of the awakening Christ consciousness and the infinite light of God. And we're one with the cycles of light and dark and death and rebirth. And we're all living together within this one life of God. And we all can contribute to this one life of God and support each other when others need help. And isn't that a wonderful lesson for this time of year that we can learn and use? And as we expand and we grow individually, we contribute to the expansion and the growth of the whole. And as we consciously learn the skills and the practices that expand us individually, we are literally contributing to the awakening of consciousness, the consciousness of good here on planet Earth and in all life. Our individual good is the good of all. What a great concept. We truly are living in that one life when we're aware of this. Honestly, I feel very fortunate to live at a time when we all, I and all of us, have the opportunity to build a spiritual toolbox, if you will, that marries not only the best of modern scientific discoveries, but also the wisdom of thousands of years of spiritual traditions. And when we weave these two approaches together, we get spiritual practices that are not only practical and effective, but also deepen us in our connection to spirit. They uplift and expand us. They support us in, as the talk title is, preparing the way to bring the divine right here onto planet Earth, to literally bring heaven to earth. So let's talk about what that looks like in our daily lives. As metaphysicians, the most common tools we use are meditation and affirmative prayer, or as Ernest Holmes called it, spiritual mind treatment, which is a specific technique that we teach in the Science of Mind practice tradition. But both of these spiritual practices marry science, cutting edge science, and spirituality, ancient wisdom. So let's take a look at the science of these spiritual practices, as well as the ancient mystical roots, and how they empower us to prepare the way for the flow of life to move through us effortlessly, easily, without resistance. As I shared before, I know I've said this a few times, I got this from Dispenza. He said that the Taoist symbol, the ancient Taoist symbol for meditation, means to become familiar with. And I think that meditation has often been misunderstood as mind control. We think that we have to stop the flow of our thoughts, which are constantly moving through our conscious mind. But that really isn't what meditation is. Meditation is an invitation for us to become more aware, to be the observer of the thoughts that flow through our mind. Our mind is a container for the thoughts that are constantly moving through it. And as we acknowledge them, we can let them move right through us, or we can decide to give them our attention, our full attention. So meditation invites us to become conscious of our thoughts and to recognize the ones that have become these familiar patterns of thinking and feeling for us over the years. And as that happens, they settle into our subconscious or subjective mind as these programs, if you will, that our body has learned so well that now they just play without us even having to think about them. Dispenza, again, calls this the body becoming the mind, just like an old song will play itself when triggered by a memory or event or something we see in our world. Our patterns of thinking and feeling play themselves automatically when something triggers them. And becoming familiar with these patterns is a benefit of meditation. It's what we talked about last week when we talked about welcoming our shadow. We begin to recognize these old patterns, and then we can draw them into the light of spirit to heal them and to tell ourselves the truth, which is the truth of God, the truth in the light. And the other thing that meditation familiarizes us with is that observer or witness part of our mind. This is our connection to the unlimited field of potential, which is already within us. And it's called by many names. It's called God, Spirit, Allah, the thing itself. And we know through practice that by slowing our breath and calming our bodies, we lower our brain waves. Here's the science. And we move out of that active analytical mind that is constantly moving and thinking into our subjective or subconscious mind. And it's here where we become familiar with our God self. This is the seat of our ability to create. God's nature is to create, our nature is to create. And it's here that we access what Joe Dispenza again calls the operating system. It's our subconscious mind that is suggestible to new ideas and new possibilities. You can't change the subconscious mind without moving down into it. So just like children are highly suggestible before the age of 6 or 7 because their brain waves tend to be much slower and much lower, our subconscious mind becomes very suggestible when we lower our brain waves. I like to think that this is what Jesus meant when he said in the Bible, in Matthew actually, unless you change and become like little children, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven. I think that's maybe what he went. Anyway, I like to think that that's what he meant. Meditation then is a means to become familiar with the patterns we've created over our lifetimes, to become familiar with the neural pathways of thinking we've built over the years and the chemical responses or feelings our thinking creates. Meditation helps us to slow our brain waves, allows us to move beyond the analytical mind and to access that operating system, that subconscious mind, the seat of possibility and the seat of creation, so that we can teach ourselves to be in a state of connection to our God selves during our waking human lives, to train ourselves to be the masters of our thoughts rather than letting them run the show. Oh, which reminds me of the story. I want to tell this little story. Let's see. I'm going to find it here so I can remind myself if I need to. Here it is. So the story goes that there was an accomplished but very conceited young archer who once dared a Zen master, who was also known for his incredible archery skills. He challenged him to a competition. And the young man's archery skills were extraordinary. So he took his first arrow out, he found his target, which was far off, and he hit the bullseye with one shot. Beautiful. And then he took out his second arrow and he split the first arrow in two with his second arrow. And then he turns to the Zen master and he says, "Think you can match that?" Very conceitedly, he asked it. And instead of responding, the monk gestured to the young man to follow him up the mountainside. And so after some time, they arrived at this deep gorge where there's just this old tree, this old log spanning the distance across the gorge to the other side. And the master quietly walked to the middle of the log and aimed at a distant tree, a distant target. And in one clean motion, he pulls out an arrow and shoots at the tree and hits it dead on. And then he turns around to this young guy and he says, "Your turn now," as he stepped back and he let the opening for the young guy, and the youth started looking at the gorge below, and he started to just shake, to just tremble uncontrollably. And he couldn't even put his foot onto the log, much less take aim of anything. And so the master turned to him and said, "You've got great control over your bow, but you have little control over the mind that lets loose the arrow." And I started thinking about this, and I'm thinking, how often do we put all this energy into controlling the things in our outside world to create change? But change doesn't begin out in the outside world. It always begins within us, where we become the observers. We become familiar with what is going on in our brain. And as our internal world changes, then our outside world, the world of form around us changes to match our internal world. So meditation and affirmative prayer are the tools that we use to focus our mind on what we'd like to bring forward in the world for our good, for the good of our families and our friends and our communities, and for the good of the world. And to the degree to which we are dedicated and committed to using these tools in our daily lives is the degree to which we see the results in every aspect of our lives. We can't just know the theory. We actually got to walk the walk. So affirmative prayer also is very much like meditation. We begin affirmative prayer, spiritual mind treatment, as Ernest Holmes, our founder, called it, and as we teach in our spiritual classes. It begins with the same elements that meditation began with. We watch our breath, we move into the silence, we connect with our source, and we feel, not only think, but feel our oneness with it. We acknowledge in our head and our heart that we're one with spirit, one with the infinite field of possibilities that's available to us through this oneness, through our oneness with spirit. And while affirmative prayer may have a more contemporary feel to it, it's actually born from ancient wisdom. And I started thinking about that line in the Bible in John. I don't want to get it wrong. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. Most of you have probably heard this before. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Here it is. And the line is in John, whatsoever you ask the Father in my name, he will give it to you. Ask and you shall receive, and your joy may be full. Well, we've all heard the ask and you shall receive. And when I read this, though, as it's written here, it sounds to me like the author is telling me that if I ask or beseech God using the name of Jesus, that he'll answer my prayer and then I'll be joyful. And that is, while that is a mode of prayer that many people use, it isn't the mode of prayer that we teach in metaphysics, in the science of mind tradition. There's another text that I ran across in my studies that is really from the same passage, but it's in the Gnostic Gospels, not in our traditional, what we think of mainstream Bible. The Gnostic Gospels includes the Gospel of Thomas, and the Gnostic Gospels are, many of them were discovered in Nag Hammadi, Egypt in 1945 in a cave. All these scrolls were discovered. And it is said that Thomas was a scribe who used to follow Jesus and wrote down all of his words and his teachings. And in this passage in Thomas, he refers to this same quote, but it goes a little farther than the one in John did. And I'm going to share it with you because I really think this one is like the template almost for our spiritual mind treatment. Hang on a minute. I'm going to share this quote with you. If I can find it. Here we go. The old quote. And here's the one in John, whosoever or whatsoever you ask the Father in my name, he will give it to you. Ask and you shall receive, and your joy may be full. But here's the one from the Gospel of Thomas. Now, this one I really love. I mean, I love them both, but all things that you ask straightly, directly, from inside my name, you will be given. Ask without hidden motive and be surrounded by your answer. You got to feel it to be surrounded by your answer. Be enveloped by what you desire, that your gladness will be full. Now, if this isn't a template for spiritual mind treatment, I don't know what is. So I love this. So here's what I hear. This second version from the Gospel of Thomas is just really metaphysical. I mean, Jesus must have been a metaphysician. I think he was. So when we give a science of mind treatment, we begin in that meditative way by contemplating, connecting with the presence of the one God and feeling our oneness with it. We prepare the way. And I think we can relate it to that line in the quote from the Gospel of Thomas that says, "From inside my name, from within the presence of the divine, I speak my truth." We connect to the presence and ask without hidden motives. In science of mind, we would say that we ask without attachment to the outcome, because we don't know what the best way for this prayer to be answered is. There's must be a much larger way than we can even imagine. If we're asking for something that we don't know yet, we can't fill in the blanks. Spirit knows the way. So we stand in the openness to the flow without attachment. And then I love this line, "Be enveloped by what you desire, that your gladness will be full." Well, be enveloped with my desire, that means that I have to feel as if the thing has happened. I have to create internally what I would like to see manifest outside. We create twice. First in our subjective mind, in the seat of our creative power, and then we see it all around us. We create the experience of the answered prayer within us with as many of our senses as we can muster. We can feel the answered prayer. We can hear it. We can see it. We can taste it. We can smell it, so that our prayer becomes alive for us inside, and then it will demonstrate in our experience. So while we use our wonderful modern technology and science to understand what's happening in our body and what's happening in the quantum field when we meditate and when we pray, we also depend and honor and glean wisdom from this ancient wisdom that has been handed down to us through so many different spiritual traditions. And it's this weaving together of science and mysticism that's gifted us with the tools that we need to use to prepare the way for our individual good. And as we experience our individual good, we share it with others, just like the meaning of this holiday season. And we invite others to share their good with the whole. And as Holmes said in the last line of that quote that I began my morning message with this morning, what was it he said? I don't want to get it wrong. "There is no reason to doubt that in the field of spiritual consciousness, a chain reaction could be created which would bless the world." We can bless the world, starting individually and thinking collectively. Let's bless the world. And let's start by doing prayer. So as we move into our time of spiritual mind treatment, for my closing prayer, let's take a nice deep breath in. Remind ourselves that God is all there is, in its beauty and its wisdom and its love and its continuity and its creation and its richness and its life and its good. We are all within it. We are all moving, breathing, and having our life within the activity of this one. We are so blessed. So I speak my word for and about each and every person that is on this call, and each and every person that is not, anyone who has ever been a part of our spiritual community and anyone who has not, that there is a shift in consciousness. There is a new way of thinking and feeling and being within this divine light that we are open to, and we allow the full movement and the unencumbered flow of this light, of this loving presence and light, to become our lives. And as it becomes our life, it becomes the life of the people whose lives we touch. And suddenly we live in a world that is radiating with the energy and the loving presence and the qualities of the divine that we draw forward in every aspect. In our health, in our prosperity, in our oneness, in our divine relationships, in our work in the world, in our joy at being alive. And it is with deep, deep gratitude and thanksgiving that I am open to this shift in consciousness. I know that I have now started a chain reaction in the law that cannot help but manifest. So for this and so much more, I simply say thank you. I allow it to be. And together we resonate our agreement by saying, and so it is. And